All right. The date, November 21st, 1926. The time, well, it was a Monday Night Football, I can tell you that much. The time, the game was being played New York Polo Grounds, probably quite possibly 2:30 promptly. The teams, the Providence Steamroller and the New York Giants. And as I said, the place, the Polo Grounds. Where else? This would be the second time in the 1926 season that the Giants and Providence would face off against one another. They did the same thing in 1925, the Giants' first season. The first ever regular season game was against the Providence Steamroller. And so Providence, Rhode Island. Oh, yeah. Where? Yeah, we got that Trivial Pursuit question. In what state was the Giants' first ever professional football game in regular season? Not their if you want to call it, they played the Newark Red Jackets. So their first ever, it was kind of like a scrimmage exhibition kind of game or whatever. So that was like their first ever, right, as I said, but it wasn't the regular season. So their first ever was in New Jersey, right? Their first regular season was in Rhode Island. I mean, not too many professional football games nowadays get played in Rhode Island, but they did back then. But 1925, the Giants played Providence twice, and the same thing this season. The Giants earlier in the season. Let's take a look here, shall we? Let's take a look here. Just trying to say, let's see. Giants. It was the Giants. It was their second game. Okay, of the season. Now, interestingly enough, they opened up their season in Connecticut. Then they went to Rhode Island after that, and then they went to Illinois, and then they went to Pennsylvania. They started off with in 1926 4 straight road games. But I said they started in Connecticut, basically the home of the Yale Bowl. So they did play some games there, in the past. They had played games there, but their second game of the season for 1926 anyway was in Rhode Island against Providence. The Giants would win that day. As I said, it was on October 3rd, 1926. Giants took a 7-0 lead. I mean, that was almost all the scoring. Providence would score a touchdown. However, the extra point would be blocked, and the Giants would wind up winning 7-6. The Giants would win this one by a much comfortable margin than just the 7-6. But the Providence Steamroller in 1926, they started off real good. And they just kind of fell apart toward the end of the season. Now, interestingly enough, the Providence Steamroller are the last defunct team to win an NFL championship. It was 1928. This is 1926. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets won the championship in 1926. And 1927 was the New York Giants. Yay! Right? They won the championship. 1928, Providence Steamroller. They won the championship of the NFL. Now, from 1929 on, every team that won the championship is still in existence today. Right? Maybe not. I mean, they're not the same city and all of that, whatever. I mean, because you got like the Baltimore Colts won at 58 and 59. Well, then when they won their Super Bowl. Right, they won Super Bowl V, but when they won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, in 2006, they're in Indianapolis, So I mean, necessarily, I'm going to go over a list here, right, in just a moment here. But in 1945, the Rams won the championship. Okay, cool. But when they won the championship, they won it in Cleveland. That was the last game they ever played in Cleveland, 1945 championship game. It was cold. After that, they went out to Los Angeles. So, I mean, so the teams are still around, but they're not necessarily in the same state or city that when they first won. Sometimes they won them in different cities. I mean, like the 1921. It was the Chicago Staleys who in 1922 became the Chicago Bears. So in 1921, the Chicago Staleys won it. And obviously then they won a boatload of them after that as the Chicago Bears. but they were basically the same team. But I said I'll go over the list here. I'll go from like 1920 to 1970 just to keep it. I'll do the first 100, first 50, or basically first 51 seasons instead of doing the whole 100 and whatever the heck it is, 104, 105, whatever we're up to now. But you'll know, as I said, after 1928, every team is still in existence, right? So 1920 had the Akron Pros, okay? Now, the first 9 seasons from 1920 to 1928, those first 9 seasons, 3 of those teams are still around, right? The other 6 are no mas, right? So you got the Akron Pros in 1920, right? 1921, the Chicago Staleys won it. They're still around because in 1922 they turned into the Chicago Bears. So that's one of the 3 teams that are still around. Then you had 3 Bulldogs in a row, right? 22 and 23, you had the Canton Bulldogs. They won back to back. 1924, you had the Cleveland Bulldogs. So out of all of those teams, except for the Chicago Staleys, they're all gone. No mas, right? 1925, right? You had the Chicago Cardinals, right? Obviously, the first season the Giants when existed. This season, 1926, you had the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, who are no mas. Some people have them tied with the Eagles, but they're not tied. 1927, right? The New York Giants. So you had the Cardinals, the Giants, and the Chicago Staleys. Those are the 3 teams that are still around. They won from 1920 to 28. Right. Providence Steamroller, 1928. They're the last team to win, and every team after that is still in existence. So the Providence Steamrollers, I'll go over their history here. They made it a few more seasons, and that was it. So then after the Providence Steamroller won, after 28, then you have your first three-peat, right? So you have the Packers did it twice. Okay. Interesting enough, this season coming up, the Chiefs are going to try to do it, right? But they'll be the first three-peat. They're trying to be the first three-peat Super Bowl, right? Because when the Packers did it, 65, 66, and 67, 65, there was no Super Bowl. Now, if they had played the Buffalo Bills, who won the AFL championship in 65, quite possibly, the Packers might have won that one. So, if there was a Super Bowl, Packers might, but there wasn't no Super Bowl in 65. So, the Kansas City Chiefs this season are trying to become the first three-peat Super Bowl champions. Never happened before. I don't think it's going to happen. But anyway, so we have 29, 30, and 31 are the Green Bay Packers, the first ever three-peat. There was no championship. They just had the best overall winning percentage, and they were declared the NFL champions. So you got 29, 30, and 31. 32, you have the Chicago Bears won. 33, you have the Chicago Bears. They beat the New York Giants. And quite possibly, my humble opinion here, quite possibly the greatest championship game of all time. But nobody sits around the fire. Hey, kids, let's sit around by the fire, roast some marshmallows, and talk about the 1933 championship game, huh? Sounds like great times, right? No, nobody does that. But in my humble opinion, because of the times, the way the Bears won, both teams had over 300 yards. Which is rather remarkable. There was the lead changes. There were so many lead changes. It was really a remarkable game. So it was 33. 1934, the Giants won. 1935, the Detroit Lions won. 1936, the Green Bay Packers won. 1937, the Washington Redskins won. 1938, New York Giants won. 1939, 1938, the Giants beat the Packers. 1939, the Packers killed the Giants. 40, 41, 42, and 43 is quite possibly the just in my once again humble opinion, but the greatest dynasty, if you want to call it, the Bears. They were just straight up killing people. 1940 championship game, they only won 73-0. That's all. 1941 championship game, they beat the Giants 37-9. So basically, they won 110-9 in 2 championship games. Interestingly enough, though, the Chicago Bears, their best team quite possibly ever. If you go back and look, I mean, how many points they gave up, how many I think they outscored their opponents like 35-7 on an average, or 34-7, something like that. They beat their opponents by almost 4 touchdowns every game in 1942. Interesting enough, that might have been their best team. Well, that year they lost. They only scored 6 points in the championship game. The Redskins, Sammy Baugh, Washington Redskins beat the Bears 14-6 in 1942. 1943, the Bears returned the favor, 41-21. The Bears beat the Redskins. So what do you got? 40 and 41 was the Bears. 42 was the Redskins. 43 was the Bears. 44 is another one of those missing ring seasons. Just doesn't sit well with me. The Packers beat the Giants 14-7. Kind of not a long story, but the Giants had played the week before the 44 championship game, and they were beat up. Half of their I can't remember who it was. One of their guys, one of their main stars, tried to go out and play, but he couldn't. He played the first series, and he couldn't play the rest of the game. The Giants were just totally decimated by injuries. The Giants played the week before. The Packers had 3 weeks off. So they were fresh as daisies. Had the Giants had 3 weeks off, right? Or if the Packers only had 1 week off, the game might have been a little bit different. So, I mean, obviously that would never happen nowadays where they would play a Super Bowl, but like this past season, you know what I mean? Right? Where they would have the Super Bowl, the Chiefs get, we get 3 weeks off and the 49ers got to play the week. That stuff would never happen. It happened back then. So that's one of the things that just missing ring seasons. I think of it because the Giants were playing home in the Polo Grounds. The Giants had beaten the Packers earlier in the season, killed them earlier in the season. Right? But I said, but if they both had the same amount of time to rest up, if the Giants had 3 weeks off prior to the change, I mean, the Giants probably might have won that game. But anyway, so the Packers won in 44. 1945, I mentioned a few minutes ago, the Rams won in Cleveland Rams. 1946, they moved to Los Angeles, but 1945, the Rams won. Right, 1946, you had another one of those missing ring seasons. A couple players, the Bears beat the Giants. A couple of the Giant players got bribed to throw the game. Right, that's another long story. But 46, the Chicago Bears won. 1947 was the last time that the Chicago Cardinals won. So if you're a Cardinal fan, you got to go back to 1947 would be the last time that you won a championship. So the Chicago Cardinals 25 and 47. Those are the only 2 seasons in Chicago. And interestingly enough, the Chicago Cardinals have been around the longest. They've been around in one form and another. I think they were the Morgan Athletic Club. It was in 1898. So they've been around for 3 centuries, and they've only won 2 championships. I'd be a little pissed off if I was a Cardinal fan too. But anyway, 1947, the Cardinals won. 48 and 49 was the Eagles won. 1950 was the Browns. This is where the Browns start some of their dominance. 1950 was the Browns. 1951, you had the Los Angeles Rams wound up winning. 1952 and 53, the Lions beat the Browns. 1954, the Browns beat the Lions. 1955, Otto Graham's last game ever out in the Los Angeles Coliseum. The Browns beat the Rams 38-14. 1956, New York Giants. 1957, the Lions beat the Browns 59-14, I believe it was, 58-59. Colts beat the Giants. 1960, the Eagles beat the Packers 61-62. The Packers won 61. The Packers beat 61-62. The Packers beat the Giants both years 61-62. 63, the Bears beat the Giants. 64, the Browns beat the Colts. 1965, 66, and 67. That's the Packers, right? But they won the championship game in 65. There was no Super Bowl. They beat the Browns 23-12. 66-67. Obviously, they beat the Cowboys in both championship, the NFL championship game. They went to the Super Bowl. They won Super Bowl I, 35-10 over the Chiefs. And then they won Super Bowl II, 33-14 over the Raiders. So that's 65 is Packers, 66 Packers, 67 Packers. 68 is the Colts, right? they won the championship game, and then they went and they lost Super Bowl 3 to the Jets, 16-7. 1969, you had the Vikings. They won the championship game, and then they went on and they lost Super Bowl 4 to the Kansas City Chiefs, 23-7. Then finally, the last one. This will be the 51st season, right? So we got 50 seasons. Went from 1920 to 1970. 1970, the final season. Just to make it a little short here, I'll go over is the Dallas Cowboys. Well, and it was the merger, right? So you had the Dallas Cowboys of the NFC, Baltimore Colts of the AFC, and basically like the Blunder Bowl. I think there was like 812 turnovers. It was not a very good Super Bowl. It was very exciting because the Colts won it in like on almost the last second field goal. I think after he kicked the field goal, I think there was like only a couple seconds left. They won. The Colts won 16-13. But so that's it. But you'll notice that after 1928, the Providence Steamroller won 28. But from 29 on, all those teams are still in existence, right? So, but the Providence Steamroller, meanwhile, back at the ranch, right? The Providence, I mean, they had, they had a lot of guys on their roster in, there we go, in 1926. I mean, I think they had like 34 guys. They had a lot of guys that only played 1 or 2 games for them. Now, I'm not exactly sure if the guys got hurt or they got cut, or exactly what the heck happened. I have no idea. But they had 34 guys on their roster. That's a lot of guys. They said they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They had 12 guys only played like 1 or 2 games for them. So I'm not exactly sure. They had a lot of rookies play for them and all that and everything, but they had a lot of guys. I mean, that's you get over 30 guys. That's quite a bit. Now the Providence, they started the season. It was kind of the tale of two halves for them. They finished the 1926 season with a record of 5-7-1, which put them on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11th place. Okay. I mean, it was a lot of teams, but put them in 11th place. It was kind of the tale of two halves for the Providence Steamroller. Now, their first 5 games, they were 4-1. Now, as I said before, on October 3rd, their second game of the season, they played the Giants, and they lost 7-6. Well, their extra point got blocked. Well, woulda, shoulda, coulda, what happened? If they kicked the extra point, right, they would have been 4-0-1. So I mean, they could have been unblemished, so to speak, in their first 5 games of the season. Then after that, they just kind of fell apart. I mean, their last 5 games of the season, they didn't score a point. They got shut out 5 straight games. I don't know. I didn't dive deep into their history or nothing like that. I mean, to see maybe what happened, but so they started off 4-1. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They were 1-6-1, their final 8 games of the season. So, as I said, the final 5 games they lost. To start the streak off, they lost 22-0 to the Kansas City Cowboys. Then they lost this game here, which I'm going to go over, to the Giants, 21-0. Then they lost 8-0 to the Pottsville Maroons. They tied the Duluth Eskimos, 0-0. And then the last game of the season, they lost to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, 24-0. And that's really nothing to be a total shame of, because Frankfurt wound up winning the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle in 1926. But even as bad as Providence was, Frankfurt won 1926. Frankfurt Yellow Jackets won the championship with a record of 14-1-2. Their only loss was to the Providence Steamroller. The Providence Steamroller on October 30th, they beat the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets 7-6. And they beat them in Philadelphia, where Frankfurt played. So that's the only blemish on Frankfurt's whole entire schedule. They were 14. They played 17 games. They were 14-1-2, and they did lose the Providence Steamroller. But after that win by the Providence Steamroller on October 30th, 1926, their season just went down the dumper. All right, let's see here. So I just go over like a little bit of the history here of the Providence Steamroller. Let's see. The Providence Steamroller, also referred to as the Providence Steamroller, the Providence Steamrollers. I've seen them steamroller. I've seen steamrollers. I'm just more used to, I think, steamroller. They were a professional American football team based in Providence, Rhode Island, in the National Football League from 1925 to 1931. Providence was the first New England team to win an NFL championship. So it wasn't the Patriots, it was the Providence Steamroller. The Steamroller won the league's championship in 1928, which is the last NFL championship win by a defunct team to date. Most of their home games were played at the Cyclodrome, which is where the Giants' first ever professional football game was played at. It was the Cyclodrome. It was basically the stadium held, I think it's 10,000 people, but it's basically a bicycle track. And inside of the bicycle track they put the football field. Let's see here. A 10,000, here we go. Okay, 10,000 seat stadium that was built as a velodrome for bicycle races. So, a bicycle track or whatever it's called, the velodrome. Well, the name they gave it to was the Cyclodrome. A bicycle. So that was the name. That's the Cyclodrome. Okay, in Rhode Island. That's the first place the Giants ever played a football game. All right, the Steamrollers were established in 1916 by members of the Providence Journal, sports editor Charles Coppin, and part-time sports writer Pierce Johnson. Three men shared in the ownership and management of the team: Coppin, James Dooley, and Peter Laudati. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Johnson stayed on as the team's manager for each year of its existence. The team soon became a regional power, and by the mid-1920s was known as the best independent team in the country. By 1919, the team was drawing in more spectators than Brown University. And remember, back then, college football was huge back then. They were drawing in more spectators than Brown University by a margin of 2-1, according to newspaper reports at the time. However, it seemed unlikely since the Steamrollers crowd was on an average of 3,000 spectators a game. So the players' wages were lower than those of Indiana and Ohio leagues. So it was harder for the Steamrollers to bring in ringers. So, obviously, you're bringing guys who are real known, good players to play on your team. And but if they're going to play on your team, they're going to want to get paid. But if you can't afford to pay people, right? Let's see here. Several college football players did play for the Steamrollers, but under aliases, so as not to jeopardize their amateur status. As I'm saying. So it's like, could you imagine like Caleb Williams? Now, this stuff happened 100 years ago, right? And even before that. Could you imagine like Caleb Williams playing, college football for USC on Saturday and then flying to Tampa to play for the Buccaneers? They're taking on the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. And people are like, aren't you Caleb Williams? Oh, no, I'm Pedro Gonzalez. But it happened back then. Right? It happened. Stuff like that happened back then. Guys played Saturday for a college university, and then they played for a professional football team and got paid on Sunday under an alias. Right? Let's see. In 1924, Providence schedule featured several NFL teams. The Steamrollers posted a 3-2-1 record against those teams, defeating the Rochester Jeffersons, the Minneapolis Marines, the Dayton Triangles. Both of the losses came against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. The team also posted a scoreless tie against the Columbus Tigers. The 1924 Steamrollers then went on to win the mythical undisputed championship of the Northeast. The team's success that season was enough to make Steamrollers management and fans start thinking about playing in the NFL, which they did, because that was in 1924. So 1925, Providence joined the NFL in time for the 1925 season. By that time, only 3 players from the 1924 team were still in the lineup, when the team's first practice of 1925 was held in September, or it was held on September 17th. In fact, only about a dozen of them wore steamroller colors for the team's debut in the NFL. The Steamrollers played mediocre football in their first 2 NFL seasons, but posted a strong 8-5-1 record in 1927, which is the year the Giants won. Giants had a record of 11-1-1 in 1927, but the Steamroller were 8-5-1 in 1927, with Jim Kinselman as the team's head coach. For his per-game salary of $292, Kinselman not only coached the team but also played quarterback in the single-wing formation. The star player for Providence was halfback George Wildcat Wilson, a 1925 All-American from the University of Washington, who had spent the 1926 season as the head of the traveling Los Angeles Wildcats of the AFL. And we're going to have more on them in just a minute. The 1928 championship season. Providence opened its 1928 season against Red Grange and the New York Yankees. Wilson's rival from the AFL, the Steamrollers led. This is the 1928 championship season, right? The Steamrollers led the Yankees 20-7 at halftime and held that score throughout the second half. However, the team's next game resulted in a 10-6 loss to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. However, the team soon rebounded with a 4-game winning streak over the Dayton Triangles, the Yankees, once again, the Pottsville Maroons, and the Detroit Wolverines. The Steamrollers faced the Yellow Jackets again at Franklin Stadium on November 17th, which resulted in a scoreless tie. However, a week later at the Cyclodrome, Providence finally avenged its only loss of the season with a 6-0 victory over the Yellow Jackets. The team would then post wins over the Giants and Pottsville before ending its season with a 7-7 tie against the Packers. Providence was named the 1928 NFL champions. Prior to the 1932 season, the NFL team with the best winning percentage was named the NFL champion. Despite the Yellow Jackets winning 3 more games in 1928 than the Steamrollers did, Providence was awarded the title due to having the better winning percentage. The winning percentage was key back then, because some teams played more than others. Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played more games than like any team. A victory banquet at the Biltmore Hotel took place a week later. At the banquet, each player was rewarded with a gold watch. It was also at this event that Kinselman was given a trophy and named the team's most valuable player. 5 of the Steamrollers players gained all NFL honors when the league issued its official honor roll on December 23rd. Wildcat Wilson and Clyde Smith were named to the first team, while Curly Oden, Milt Reinquist, and Gus Sonnenberg were placed on the second team. And then we have they have some NFL firsts here, right? Over the course of the next seven years, the team not only won an NFL championship, but also established 3 league firsts. In 1925, Providence was the first team to play its home games in a bicycle racing stadium, a velodrome, which was called the Cyclodrome. In 1929, the Steamrollers established 2 NFL firsts. In a 6-day period between November 5th and November 10th, 1929, Providence played 4 games. Holy crap. The marathon string began against the Staten Island Stapletons, then they played the Chicago Cardinals and concluded with a 2-game series against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. Although the Steamrollers made history, their 0-3-1 record during the 6-game stretch proved to be a scheduling disaster. During the second game of that 4-game series, Providence hosted the Cardinals on November 6th. The game was played at night at nearby Kinsley Park, where floodlights recently had been installed. The teams had originally been scheduled to play on Sunday, November 3rd, but heavy rains made the Cyclodrome field unplayable. And it wasn't like it is nowadays. Like, you can have a tsunami of water get washed over a stadium nowadays. And the way the fields drain, it's like, like 15 minutes later, you wipe your hands on there. Oh, it's dry. It's bone dry. I mean, there was no drainage back then. The fields were wet. They stayed wet. There was no drainage. Since neither team wanted to lose a payday, the historic night game was hastily scheduled. Because of this, Providence made history again by being the first team to host an NFL game at night under floodlights. Although the Steamrollers lost 16-0, the game was declared a success because 6,000 fans attended. Maybe the beginning of Monday Night Football. Interesting. The decline of the Providence Steamroller. Despite the 28 championship, the team experienced troubles in 1929. On October 4th, 1929, Sonnenberg defeated Strangler Lewis in 2 straight falls to capture the World Heavyweight Championship in professional wrestling. This caused Sonnenberg to stay out of football as he could make better money defending his title. And it was probably safer, too. So they lost one of their players because he just decided to be a wrestler. Meanwhile, Oden quit pro football to take a job with an insurance company in Boston, and Smith decided to return to his native Missouri and coach football. Conselman also didn't fully recover from a knee injury sustained in 1928. Ryan Quist missed the first half of the season due to illness, and Wildcat Wilson became complacent and turned into an ordinary back. The 1929 Steamroller struggled to a 4-6-2 record, resulting in 7th place in the league. This caused the fans who attended each game during the championship season to start staying home. And, the paying fans were huge back then. Remember, there's no TV rights and stuff like that like they have nowadays, right? Or TV, money, right? Back then. Team posted a 6-4-1 record in 1930 and a 4-4-3 record in 1931. The lack of interest coupled with the Great Depression in 1930 caused Dooley, Coppin, and Laudati to suspend operations after the 1931 season. The 3 owners then gave up and turned the franchise back over to the NFL in 1933. Interestingly, the origin of the name, right? During halftime against a game between the Steamrollers and the Providence Pros, Charles Coppin, who was getting a hot dog, heard a remark that the opposing team was getting steamrolled. Coppin loved the remark so much he named his team the Steamrollers. So that's where they got their because he heard a comment while he was at halftime. Or just during a game. Oh, during halftime. Yeah, during halftime of the game. One of the owners for the Providence Steamrollers heard him. Oh, one team's getting steamrolled. And he's like, wow, that's a cool name for it. Would be called. So that's how the Steamrollers got their name. Right. Other steamroller teams. I just did this real fast here. A team known as the Providence Huskies. The Steamroller had used a husky-like dog as their mascot. So this team may have been a continuation of or successor of the Steamrollers, but they played during the 1933 season, the Providence Huskies. The Huskies earned a perfect season, but they're the only season in professional or semi-professional record books to have not allowed their opponents to score a single point over an entire season. In 1936, an unrelated Providence Steamroller team played in New England in the New England Football League for one season. So, but that's kind of like the history of the Providence Steamroller, the rise and the fall. But if you look at it, if you look at the Providence Steamroller, if you type in Providence Steamroller and go to Wikipedia, right, and you look at there's a picture of a husky. It's all the Huskies in white, but it's got it's red. It's got a red background. It says Providence Steamrollers underneath it, and it's a picture of a husky. So that's where they got their mascot is of a husky. So, but on this one day, the Giants and the Providence Steamroller were to play. Unfortunately, I mean. This is 1926, and this is also the year of the original AFL. It only lasted one season, and why? Well, because people couldn't afford or people didn't come out to watch professional football and to support it. So the AFL went to funk. So basically, in 1925. It was just the NFL. 1926, the AFL was formed. I'm not going to go into it. It's a little long story. So, and I'm already up to about 35 minutes here, and I haven't even started talking about the game yet. But another league, the AFL, formed. And unfortunately, the AFL started putting teams in some of the same cities that the NFL was in. And the problem was that there's only so many paying customers that were going to go to an NFL or a pro game. For whatever reason, to see college, people would come out in droves to see college football. But an NFL, a pro game, not as many people were going to come out, were willing to pay their hard-earned money to come out and see a professional game. So the problem was to put two teams like in the same, even New York. I'm gonna go over and Brooklyn too, right? To put two teams in the same city, and then it was just almost kind of like suicide. And not only that, but to have them play on the same day is just straight up crazy. Well, this particular day there was 3 games played in New York. And just. I do know the Giants lost money in 1926, but at least they stayed afloat. And the reason why they stayed afloat was because Tim Mara, the owner, he had other, he was a bookkeeper. And back then it was legal. So he was making money with his bookkeeping business. So he knew that if he needed money, if his team needed money, he had money coming in. But the new 1926 New York Giants lost money during the 1926 season. But let's see, we got professional grid teams in 3 battles today. There's 3 battles that, which is, whoops. There we go. All right. The professional footballers are still at it. Another good card of contests are slated for local gridirons this afternoon, in which all of the New York's Pro 11s will be seen in action. In the National League tilts, the local Giants will tackle the Providence Steamrollers, and the newly organized Brooklyn Lions will hook up with Brick Muller's Los Angeles. They got Los Angeles Kickers here. It was the Los Angeles Buccaneers. That was the team that played the Giants the week prior, and they beat the Giants 6-0. So the Brooklyn Lions were which is about, is quite a few miles away from the Polo Grounds where they were playing at, but still all close proximity, right? So and then Red Grange and his New York Yankees of the AFL, were taking on the Los Angeles Wildcats in Yankee Stadium, which is like hundreds of feet. The Polo Grounds and Yankee Stadium were hundreds of feet apart from one another. They were very close. And that was just put the same, put 2 games, 2 professional games, one at Yankee Stadium, one at the Polo Grounds, and basically split up the ticket sales. It was just like suicide. And it did, because basically what wound up happening was after the season was over, the AFL folded because they couldn't compete with the NFL. The Yankees Wildcat battle at Yankee Stadium should be a corker, whatever that means. The Yankees seem headed for the championship and Red duplicate his feats last Sunday when he ran wild against the Boston Bulls. The Wildcats will probably be tamed. Eddie Tryon, who has been enjoying a great season with the pros, will be back in the lineup to assist Grange in backfield duties. Pooley Hubert and Georgie Pease will play alongside of Grange and Tryon. Besides Wilson, one of the greatest grid stars in the West, local fans will see Jimmy Bradshaw, often mentioned as an All-American back in his college days, in action. Meanwhile, over at the Polo Grounds, where the Giants will entertain Providence, attending fans will see Jackson Kiefer, former Brown luminary, who almost single-handedly defeated Dartmouth and Colgate last year. Cy Wentworth and Curly Ogden will play alongside the Providence Flash. Hinkie Haynes, Jack McBride, Jack Haggerty, and Walter Koppisch, all well known to local fans, will start in the Giants' backfield. Meanwhile, at Ebbets Field will be the scene of the fracas between the newly organized Brooklyn Lions and the Los Angeles 11. Well, it was the Los Angeles Buccaneers, headed by great Brick Mueller. The Brooklyn Lions, composed of the Horsemen and the Lion 11, have been practicing together all week and hope to show the Brooklyn fans a good pro team. Now, the interesting thing about this was that, as I had mentioned, right, the AFL formed, right, for one season. But one of the teams that was in the AFL was the Brooklyn Horsemen. They only played, I think, 4 games because nobody came to see them. They couldn't afford to stay afloat, so they had to fold. They only played, I think, 4 games. Well, what they did was after they folded, they merged with the Brooklyn Lions, and they played the last few games of the season. And some of them I saw actually the Brooklyn Horse Lions. I also saw the Brooklyn Horsemen, too, as well. So they went by a couple different names. But what they were referring to here is that because this is toward the end of the season, the Brooklyn Horsemen of the AFL had folded by then. They merged with the Brooklyn Lions of the NFL to become the Brooklyn Lions, the Brooklyn Horsemen, Brooklyn Horse Lions. I've seen multiple names, but the 2 teams merged. Why? Well, as I said, once again, because they put 2 teams from different leagues, pro team in the same proximity, trying to play against one another, and there just was not enough money to go around. Not enough people were going to pay to see a pro football game, even in the wonderful state of New York, the wonderful city of New York. Not enough people. People would see baseball, they would see boxing, they would see college football, but pro football, it was a tough sell, very tough sell. And I said it was almost like straight up suicide, putting 2 teams from different leagues, pro team, right in the same city, like right next to each other and all that, especially playing on the same day. It was just straight up suicide. And the newly formed AFL, by the end of the season, I think they had 9 teams in the AFL. I think only 4 of them were left by the end of the season. 4 or 5 of the teams. Yeah, I'm not going to type it up on Wikipedia. If you look it up, it's 9 teams started in 1926. By the end of the season, there was only like 4 or 5 teams were still in existence, and after the season was over, the AFL was no mas. It only lasted 1 season. So, but what's going on this particular day, November 21st, 1926, there was 3 games being played in New York City, and that's just straight up suicide. Yeah, straight up suicide. So, let's get on to the game, shall we? Ooh, so exciting! All right, here we go. Grid Giants roll over Steamrollers 21-0. Oh yeah. Let's see what we got here. Hinkie Haynes and McBride star against Providence. The New York Giants rolled the Providence Steamrollers flatter than the historic pancake in a National League professional football game at the Polo Grounds yesterday. The score was 21-0. It was the chilliest afternoon of the football season to date, and the presence of at least 5,000 customers attended both to the fortitude of the customers and the pulling power of the game. Dashing Hinkie Haynes was the outstanding figure of the game. He scored 2 of the Giants' touchdowns on pretty end runs and was continually breaking loose for runs of various distances. Jack McBride, the other Giant standby, also struck many a shrewd blow for the Polo Grounders. He crashed through the Providence line for a touchdown in the final period. Walter Koppisch contributed several worthy gallops around the ends and generally played one of the best games he has shown on the pro gridirons. Haynes was hurt in the 4th period and had to be carried off the field. The Providence team could make no worthwhile headway against the sturdy Giant line and were forced to throw forward passes desperately whenever they got the ball, which was not often. Jackson Kiefer, the Brown University star of last season, started in the Providence backfield, but was hurt in the first period, so the fans did not have a chance to see him do his stuff. Quarterback Odin was the lone member of the visitors who had much success at advancing the ball. He swept around the Giant ends for an occasional gain. Then we got here the starting teams. Weber was the Giants' left end. Parnell was their left tackle. Alexander was their left guard. Murtaugh was their center. Nesser was their right guard. Owen was their right tackle. Tilly Voss was the Giants' right end. Grigg was their quarterback. Haynes was the right halfback. Haggerty was their left halfback. And McBride was the fullback. Now, what do we got? 1, 2. There was only, out of this starting 11 here, only 4 of them were in the Giants from 1925. There's a lot of turnover. Every year there was a lot of turnover. We have Parnell, Alexander, McBride, and Haynes. Those are the only 4 guys who were with the Giants in 1925. For Providence, Garvey was their left end. Coplaw was their left tackle. Donahue was their left guard. Eckstein was their center. Young was their right guard. Julian was their right tackle. Gulian. Kozlowski was their right end. Odin was their quarterback. Hummel was their right halfback. Keener was their left halfback, and Wentworth was their fullback. As they said here, Hinkie Haynes scored 2 touchdowns, and Jack McBride scored 1. And the point after touchdown, Jack McBride kicked all 3. Jack McBride was very good at kicking. In 1924, his last season as college, he led all of college with successful field goal tries. I believe it was with 11. He was second in the nation scoring points. He had 90 points. So he'd scored some on extra point tries. He had 11 successful field goal tries, which back then was a lot. And he had some touchdowns. So he had 90 points he scored. But remember, also he scored 90 points. But back then, the college teams only played like 9 games, unlike this 27 that they play nowadays. With the college championships and the playoffs and the championship game and all that stuff and everything. So back then they didn't play that many games. Then we have substitutes. Bomar went in for Voss. Kopish went in for Grigg. Biggs for Murtaugh. Murtaugh went back in for Biggs. Harms for Parnell. Kid Hill for Haggerty. And Bednar for Murtaugh. Cowboy Hill went in for McBride, and Grigg went in for Haynes. For the Steamrollers, Laird went in for Wentworth, McPhee for Keeler. So basically, it looks like the Steamrollers only had like maybe 2 substitutes winning the whole game. All right, this one here. Providence halted by football giants. Haynes, Kopish, and McBride lead way in a 21-0 victory before a crowd of 15. This says 15,000. The other one said about 5,000, or at least 5,000. Here it says 15,000. New York scores early. Counts in the first period, but real punch comes in final half of game at Polo Grounds. Behind the flashing sweeps and smashing line drives of Hinkie Haynes, Walter Kopish, and Jack McBride, the New York football Giants worked out 3 touchdowns, narrowly missed a 4th, and won easily 21-0 from the Providence Steamrollers at the Polo Grounds yesterday in National Football League game before a crowd of 15,000 that braved the icy blast of winter that whirled through the stands. Well, it wasn't winter yet. I mean, you figure winter doesn't start until it was like December 22nd. This was November 21st, so it was chilly, but it was in November. But you remember back then, there's no, how they have the global warming that we have nowadays. Where back then, November it could get cold, especially in New York. The game was slow in developing anything sensational. The first half being devoted mainly to kicking and to attempts on the part of Providence to get loose with spread formations, though Haynes managed to slide across with the first score of the day in the opening period. In the second half, Kopish, who used to make touchdowns, for Columbia broke loose in a sustained flash of broken field running and line breaking that led to the second touchdown, with Haynes again adding the final touch. The third score came when McBride tore the Providence line to pieces with his drives. Jackson Kiefer, formerly of Brown, the star of the Providence lineup, was injured and removed early in the fray, and the stellar role for the steamroller fell to the lot of Odin, another former Brown back. Odin played well, but he was unable to carry the burden alone. Haynes was the best player through the entire game and was carried off the field at the close, badly shaken up with a sprained neck. Giants held the ball during most of the first two periods, Providence getting the ball only 3 times. But each of the New York attacks ended either in grounded passes or failure to make the distance, with the result that Haynes' first touchdown was the only score of the first 30 minutes. Haggerty starts drive. This came along about midway in the opening period when Haggerty took a Providence punt at midfield. Haynes and McBride then put on the most sustained attack of the first half. Plunging and tearing at the guards and tackles, Haynes and the plunger from Syracuse, McBride, jammed through to the 8-yard line, where Haynes varied the attack by going wide around his right end behind excellent interference in which Nesser figured prominently and slid across the line for the touchdown. On this play, the promise of colorful action from Jackson Kiefer, Brown's great star of last season, went glimmering when the flashy back injured his knee and McPhee took his place. Following the delay, McBride dropped over a placement for the extra point, and New York led by 7 points. At the opening of the second period, Providence went beyond midfield. Odin showed up strongly. They were usually using a spread formation which sent the forward wall almost from sideline to sideline, but the steamroller had more success running than with the passing. When they turned to the latter, the Giants generally knocked down the passes and took the ball away. The rest of the period consisted mainly of punting. Both teams had scoring chances in the early part of the second half, but they brought nothing. Koppisch breaks loose. Walter Koppisch, a broken field runner at Columbia, suddenly turned line breaker and went slamming through, aided a bit by Haynes and McBride until the Providence 25-yard line was reached. McBride went back to try a placement, but it was partially blocked and rolled over the goal line for a touchback. So the Giants tried a field goal, but it did not occur. Didn't happen. The delay was only temporary, however, for after an exchange of kicks, Koppisch started off in earnest and turned in a series of well-turned runs that carried the ball to the Providence 25-yard line. Hinkie Haynes started wide around his right end, and in the prettiest run of the day, eluded 4 tacklers to slide down the opposite sideline to the second touchdown. McBride added the extra point. Then Koppisch and Haynes started it again. The former turned in a great dodging run from a scrimmage, coming through left tackle and getting free of all but the Providence safety man for 40 yards, and the latter going round right end for 20 more yards. That brought the ball to the 24-yard line, and McBride started. The big line breaker jammed through center on 2 tries to the 1-yard line, staggering alone with the tacklers hanging all over him, and then on third try went over for the touchdown. He hit, and then he added the extra point. The rest of the half was devoted for the most part to attempts at line breaking and punting, with the latter more successful, meaning the punting. McBride, his job done for the day, was relieved, but then left Hinkie Haynes in too long. He finally was carried from the field when he got injured. All right, I got one more here. One more. Let's see here. This is from one more here. We got a nice little. It says straight football wins for Giants. All right. Straight football. Providence bows after tricky games proves unproductive of results. The New York Football Giants and the Providence Steamrollers unleashed their respective bags of tricks before 10,000. See, it's unbelievable. One article says 5,000. The last one I just read said 15,000, and this one said 10,000. Go figure, right? Respective bags of tricks before 10,000 enthusiastically shivering fans at the Polo Grounds yesterday. And in spite of the fact that the Giants were more tricky, they won handily by a 21-0 score. Really fine individual play was thrown into the shadows as professional teams let loose a sufficient number of spectacular, if futile, plays to provide a Park 11 with scoring vehicles for 2 seasons. Ew. Since professional football players are a pretty smart lost, this collection of stupefiers, which included everything but hiding the ball under the jersey of some fleetback, did not gain much ground. Erie in the I guess maybe there might be maybe a spelling error. Maybe it's supposed to be early in the second half. The contest had reached the stage where a straight tandem buck or a plain off tackle slam was a novelty, and the Giants sensed something of this. For Jack McBride went through center for incredible gains of 8 and 10 yards. The so-called Steamrollers were almost as proficient in wayward directions as the Giants. After the New Yorkers had pounded over a touchdown in the first period, the Rhode Island boys took the air in manner effected by hopelessly beaten combinations to score just 1 touchdown in the last minute of the play. I'm not sure what the hell that means because they didn't score, so I'm not sure. After the New Yorkers had pounded over a touchdown, the Providence, Rhode Island boys took the air in the manner affected by hopelessly beaten combinations to score just 1 touchdown in the last minute of play. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it sounds like they're referring that the Providence Steamrollers scored a touchdown, but many of these passes failed, and the ones that were completed did little damage. Curly Oden of the Providence Steamroller then started to run from the same passing formation and frequently made a line of scrimmage, although the time taken to bring him down suggested lengthy runs goalward. The Giants uncorked a football version of a double play in the fourth period that should go down in history. Koppish to McBride to Koppish, a forward pass and a return backward pass that culminated in a beautiful end run was a tribute to the inventive genius responsible for its development. The all but one collegians, aside from these momentary lapses, played sterling football. Particularly did the one who does not claim an alma mater, Al Nesser. This half-blonde, half-bald guard was a demon in the line and in some miraculous way took leave of his duties there long enough to supervise the scoring of the first Giant touchdown. Hinkie Haynes scored this one on a wide sweep around end, but not until Nesser had bowled over half of the Steamrollers that lay in his path. Hinkie Haynes was the outstanding figure of the day, contributing a 30-yard run for a touchdown before his injury in the final quarter that made the spectators glad they had come to freeze. Haynes started from the sideline on his left, bound for nowhere in particular and very much on his own, arriving at the line of scrimmage after a journey halfway across the field. He cut in behind his alleged interference and started and reversed himself as tacklers slid hither and yon off his elusive flanks. Then he streaked straight for the sideline, shaking off more tacklers and darting down the line with a clear path. Walter Koppish was also very much in evidence and played probably his best professional game. With a little interference, Walter might have done considerably more scoring. He got off for a brilliant runs only to be inexcusably cut down. Jack McBride did his customary superb work, and Lynn Bomar scintillated during his brief appearance. Curly Oden, former Brown luminary, was a large portion of the Steamrollers and performed nobly. Jack Kiefer did not have a chance to show his stuff. He was flattened for the count in the first period. So, It's funny. I mean, it is what it is, But I mean, it's just the way some of them they write these articles and all, because basically they're trying to make it sound, or describe it in such words. Because not many people. There's no ESPN film. There's no NFL films. Oh, I'll just turn on the TV and I'll watch the highlights of the game. No, if you weren't there, there was no. That was it. You know what I mean? So for the people in the newspaper, trying to write these articles, so people can have a better understanding of how the game goes and all that and everything. Like, you're trying to make it dramatic and exciting and all that and everything, but it's just the way they word some of it. It's 100 years ago, so it's kind of funny. But so with this win here, the Giants will have two games left in the season. They will be back to back. Play 2 games against the Brooklyn Lions, who are actually the Brooklyn Horsemen or the Brooklyn Horse Lions. The final 2 games of the season, November 25th, which was Thanksgiving, right? So that'll be the next game I do. All right, and then the final game of the season would be Sunday, November 28th. Both of them against the Brooklyn Lions, Horse Lions, or whatever it was. Those are the 2 teams that merged. The Brooklyn Horsemen from the AFL and the Brooklyn Lions of the NFL. Toward the end of the season, they merged, and those would be the final 2 games that the Giants would be playing against those teams. That team, they were not very good, so the Giants would prevail in those 2 games. But the Giants won this game here rather handily against the Providence Steamroller, 21-0. And after this game here, they would be 6-4-1. And unfortunately, back in the day, I mean, you have 4 losses. I mean, you can kiss yourself goodbye. You don't have a snowball's rear end chance in HEL double hockey sticks of winning the championship. So basically, they were just playing for pride. So the Giants with this win would be 6-4-1. They'd win the final 2 games of the season, and they would finish the 1926 season with a record of 8-4-1, which is almost identical to what they had the year before. 1925, they were 8-4. 1926, they were 8-4-1. So that's pretty much what happened on this date, November 21st, 1926, in New York Football Giants history. See you next time.